NewsCompass tonight. Now, measures adopted by the government to counter the spread of COVID-19 virus are having a particular impact on women and girls, including elevating the risk of gender-based violence. According to the government, 45% of women and girls aged 15 to 49 have experienced physical violence and 14% have experienced sexual violence. Many cases are not reported to authorities and few women get justice or receive medical care. Now, this month, Chief Justice David Maraga noted the rise in sexual offences since March 13th, when coronavirus was first confirmed in Kenya. He said sexual offences constituted 35.8% of cases recorded since then. Now, tonight, to discuss that candid conversation, we are joined by Betty Adera, who is a social advocate and CEO of Betty Adera Foundation and Executive Director for the Federation of Women Lawyers, that is FIDA, and Ireri. Of course, we want to take now other statistics that we have currently on GBV here in the country. Now, 1 in every 3 women worldwide will experience physical or sexual abuse in their lifetime. Also, we have 1 in 5 internally displaced or refugee women living in humanitarian crisis have experienced sexual violence. And as I had told you earlier, 45% of women and girls aged 15 to 49 have experienced physical violence and 14% have experienced sexual violence. Now, we are joined tonight, as I told you earlier, by Betty Adera, who is a social advocate and CEO of Betty Adera Foundation. And we are joined by Executive Director for the Federation of Women Lawyers, that is FIDA, Anne Ireri. Thank you so much for joining us. We were supposed to be joined by Dr. Ouko, who is a sociologist, but of course, due to some technical hitches, he will not be joining us. But I know the women that we have on board today will be talking on behalf, or will be speaking, will be giving a voice, a male voice to this conversation tonight. Thank you so much, Betty and Anne, for joining us. Good evening.
Good evening.
All right, let's dig into this conversation right away. And of course, there are statistics that have been given. Of course, yeah, there are statistics that have been given that is about 39% of women and girls aged 15 years have experienced some sort of SGBV, according to the National Gender and Equality Commission. And this time during the COVID-19, the cases have risen. And let's just start with you. The cases have risen. We blame this on the curfew during this time, before we get into detail with the curfew?
Good evening, and thank you for having us here. As you have rightfully pointed out, what we are having in terms of the GBV is that it's actually the silent pandemic. That is what we are referring to. And as you rightfully stated, that the Chief Justice, the Honorable Chief Justice, did give statistics. And as FIDA, we do confirm those numbers because we also see it in the NCAJ, that's the National Council for the Administration of Justice. And so we have been concerned by these statistics, and we're trying to work around, one, what really is the cause of this rise? Is it truly a surge? And two, what could have been done prior to the pandemic to reduce the statistics? So yes, it's alarming. As FIDA, we are working around working around the clock to really make sure that we have the statistics. And as you're aware, we have a toll center that we are receiving calls on a daily basis, and indeed we are seeing a surge in the queries, in the cases being reported by the public, and we are very keen to unravel, even beyond this pandemic, what really is the cause for this surge, so that we prepare as a country for future purposes, that we are able to actually preempt such a pandemic. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Of course, with the rising cases, some of these cases are not reported. And especially now that there is a curfew, some women have complained that they're not able, of course, to go and call. They can't call the police. They can't do anything. Some of these cases are not reported. Betty, what can we do about this? Because they will remain in those houses. They can't run away to their parents, if I may say, or run away anywhere with a curfew if these things are actually happening at night. What happens then?
Thank you. And thank you for having me
Sure.
on the show tonight. I'm thinking that if you're to really think about a sustainable way and a comprehensive way to
Right.
enhance reporting and resolution of cases, we really need to look at gender based violence in its totality. We have to look at the entire Kenya, not just Nairobi, not just the slums. We
Yeah.
have to look at the men as well. We remember we agreed to talk, to talk also for the boy child.
Yeah.
And we have to think about that girl in Turkana who, because she's at home, she's going to be, married off. That is child marriage, that is forced marriage, gender-based violence, just right there. And we all know that it's against the law. So what can communities experiencing that do? Now come back to places like, the rest of Kenya. We are seeing, as Anne is saying, a surge in domestic violence, in psychological violence, in cyber bullying, and also sexual based violence. And what I keep hearing, even at our foundation, is that when they attempt to report, the reporting system at the police station are so concerned about the curfew, maintaining the law,
Yeah.
being strict about all these restrictions.
Yes.
And no one is giving priority to, to gender-based violence. So it's like it's being kept away, like, wait until this corona is over, then we can revisit. And we, of course, we know that if nothing happens, then one, possibilities of prosecution become slimmer as more time, is taken. And of course, justice delayed, is justice denied. I'm thinking that reporting is not has coronavirus. Even before this pandemic, we had challenges with reporting. And now the virus is just making it even more complicated. So I'm thinking that anyone who needs to get their voice out there needs to do so. One, to educate people about gender-based violence and to remind them that you still have your rights, even if we are within the COVID-19 pandemic season, and that it is your right to go to a police station and report. It is your right to seek help outside of your home, of course, respecting the curfew times and all that. And of
All
course,
right.
also educate people the government call lines,
Okay.
the gender, the national helpline, so that they can also make use of that facility.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. As a social advocate, we also have our kids studying from home right now. And of course, this has an effect on them with the gender-based violence. Of course, whatever happens, if it's the mother or the father, whatever is happening at home, this has an effect on our kids, right? Betty?
Yes, actually, it has a big effect. And coronavirus, the pandemic is not helping. It is actually compounding an already bad situation, only making it worse. Remember, children, was suffering. Children whose parents were in a conflict was suffering. But now add, the fact that the kids must be at home. They're encouraged to stay like inside the house and actually study. So they're just right there watching their parents, argue and fight and do all these kinds of things. And we're also seeing actually an increase in cases of household level sexual violence, which is actually increasing. And that is actually a worrying trend. So this is a time
All
to think
right.
about the family as a whole,
Yeah.
the parents as well as the children.
Okay.
Everyone is.
Okay, I'm going to throw this question to Anne. Of course, when you look at social media and the things that have been happening there, when people throw those videos on social media, of course, women are always seen as the victims. And of course, some complain of feminism when you say something about it. And what about the men?
Thank you very much. I think, as you've rightfully pointed out, we see more of women reporting, more because a lot of work has been done around sensitizing women. But increasingly, we are seeing men are also victims. At FIDA, for instance, I can confirm we have received cases of men who have been violated. And what we are trying to do is to work around with institutions who focus on masculinity, who work with men to help us raise this voice. And one of the things we've been bold about as FIDA is, yes, we speak to the women, we speak to the girls, because that's what we work for. That's our forte. We are women, for instance. And so we've called upon the men in Kenya, the masculinity in society, to join hands and also speak about the boy child, about men who are being violated, because indeed there are cases that are out there. There are cases that are underreported because of existing stereotypes, existing perceptions that, for instance, men should not or cannot be violated. And we've seen progress in that front. We have seen now men being more bold to report even when they have grievous bodily harm, to even go to police stations. And of course, as Betty has said, what remains to be done at institutional level, for instance, with National Police Service and other agencies, is to work around sensitizing them continuously that GBV is not just a women's issue, that we can also have men and boys being affected. And indeed, we are seeing a lot of boys especially being affected, so that they're able to get the same kind of access to justice as the women and girls do. Article 48 of our Constitution is very clear in terms of access to justice, regardless of your gender. You ought to get access to justice when you need it. So we need to work around the clock, and the agencies I know are working under that perception and working towards ensuring that these guarantees under the Constitution do not remain a mirage, but are actually actualized, and citizens can really reap the fruits of this Constitution.
All right. And I'm going to ask, there's a reason why we wanted a sociologist to come and explain to us, because this is also maybe something that has come because of the things that we do out of the norm. We are now staying at home together with our husbands or our wives, and some of these things the men are not used to. You've seen people on social media saying, women, oh my gosh, we are not used to staying with our wives, and that means now we have to tolerate each other. Of course, using the word tolerate, which is, I mean, if you ask me, that's not a very good word, tolerate each other. However, is this, out of the norm or the culture that we are used to? When you go to work, you come back, of course, you find the wife has cooked, or, you don't spend that much time together, but now it's different. Could this be bringing up now the issues? I've heard of stories of men who are staying up late at night, outside their houses until like 3 a.m. You come back to find your wife is asleep, so you don't have to deal with the wife. I mean, is this something that is, bringing up these issues as well?
If you allow me to take a stab
Kindly, Betty,
at
yeah.
particular. Actually, even at our foundation, we have a cohort of men who have been violated physically by women in their lives. Women can be wife, women can be girlfriend, or whoever is there. And if you walk out there, the general feeling is that home is no longer, the place to run to.
Yeah.
Truth be told, men want to spend time out there with the boys and go home to their homes only when they just must go, which can be like at 3 in the morning, you creep in, and by 5 a.m., you're out. And if you speak to women, the conversation is the same. They're like, whew, when he's not in the house,
space.
I can breathe, I need space,
Yeah.
So now, COVID is here with us, and you're forced to stay at home, all right? And if you have to get out of your house by 7, p.m., you must be indoors, or else you get into trouble. Then to add like salt into injury, people are broke.
People are broke,
there's loss of jobs,
yes.
loss of income, and people are edgy. Both men and women are edgy. And also remember, you have now all your kids, right there with you. And they're doing homework, they're doing schoolwork, and they're asking you maths questions, and it's not like you are the best math student yourself.
Right.
So all this culminate into a lot of pressure that any slight trigger, causes quite some huge, outburst of violence that is even shocking. So I'm thinking, for me, Corona is just confirming what we keep hearing, what we keep seeing. And I'm thinking that we really need to have a conversation,
Actually,
like a real deep conversation. Women with women, men with men, but then also men with women. So that at the end of the day, when we're talking about prevention and mitigation and response to all forms of gender-based violence, it is not a war. It is not a contest between men and women.
Right.
If you see, even when, for instance, the Buruburu case just, the other day,
yeah.
I mean, the social media was just awash with all manner of, now where are those feminists? Now where are this? And
But
No, like women
they are
from
still doing
particular communities.
investigations though, because it's not really confirmed that he
It's not
actually was,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly,
yes.
exactly. But look at the public judgment that was already passed on even the spouse
Yeah,
or the female partner of the victim.
yes.
And all that is gender-based violence. What do you think that woman is going through? And if you look through that conversation, you'd think there is men have pent up, women have pented up, and now it's like a war between men and women. And I don't think that's the strategy of winning the war against gender-based violence.
Yeah, and just to, people are saying that when it's women being beaten by men, it's, what is it called? It's women, everyone is fighting for the women. But when it's a man, it's, oh, love has gone sour. They don't call it, it's not gender-based violence anymore. It's love gone sour. What is your opinion on that?
I think for me, I'll just proceed from where Betty has left,
Yeah.
especially in terms of the level, I call it toxic energy that we're seeing, especially on social media.
Yes.
And for me, what I feel it's actually an indicator that the state should pick, that we need to have a conversation, one, to really demystify this seemingly toxic relationships that we are seeing, one, in the perceptions, especially among the young people. This takes us back to even instances when we unfortunately had very high levels of femicide in Kenya. And if you read what was happening on social media, it was unfortunate to see young men and young boys really being so negative and toxic. And of course, naturally, you'll find a lot of the young women equally retaliating with the same level of toxic energy. I think what Betty has said is that one, and I do agree with her, that the COVID pandemic has, as I said, exposed the silent pandemic, which is a GBV in the country. And getting out of COVID, what we need to invest in as a country is a national dialogue on the family system in Kenya. I think we always say the family is a bedrock of society. So we need to be able to have those candid and comfortable discussions as a country. Why are we where we are? Why do we have this toxic energy and communication on social media? Why should someone, if they're fed up of a relationship, hurt another partner? And one of the things we've even worked on at FIDA through our mediation process is to really communicate that people can co-parent. You're not forced to stay together. Life and safety of everyone comes first. So we hope that even getting out of COVID, and we trust the authorities, the government is watching what is happening, especially on GBV.
Yeah.
Let's have that candid discussion as a country on the family unit, what is ailing us and how do we get out of this situation? Because if we don't, we are facing a disaster actually that's coming
Yeah, and
in terms of the family setup.
right. And when you say about that, about co-parenting, there are people, of course, who are like, no, I have to stay here for the kids. I have to stay here for my kids because, I mean, so they will go through all of that and not even report to the authorities because, of course, they want to stay for they want the kids to grow up with both the parents. We've had stories like that. And right now, even people on social media, you can see people complaining of marital rape. Of course, when, for example, you have your families visiting over, there are those kids who are being sexually harassed, of course, sexually assaulted. And they're not reporting this to authorities. Now, what happens then? Anne, if you could, yeah.
So I think one, for us as FIDA, that it's good to confirm, we've had this discussion with the Inspector General of Police, who has assured us that any nature of crime in terms of GBV during the pandemic is what is qualified as a serious crime. So let families not be quiet. Let us speak out. As FIDA and other institutions in this space, we are monitoring the take-up of these cases by the justice system, and the courts are also working. Remember, with the Honorable Chief Justice said there's a scale down, but the courts are not closed. So if we have these perpetrators, for us to have the entire chain of justice being effected, let the reports be made to the police stations, please taken so that these perpetrators can be taken to court, and within the court precincts, pleas are being taken and hearings are proceeding.
But
While
Anne,
we
right now,
emphasize on
sorry
this,
to cut you, have you received any reports from, or any reports from the police saying that this number of people have actually come to report during this time?
yes, the statistics are there. We are working to collate them, but as I mentioned, FIDA is a member of the NCAJ, that's the National Council of Administration of Justice, together with the National Police Service. And we have regular updates during this COVID pandemic, and they've confirmed that cases are being taken up. Where we are having challenges and citizens are reporting, we are picking these cases very speedily and highlighting or spotlighting these specific stations that are declining to take the cases. And I can confirm that once we do that, action is being taken. And why we insist on the reporting is because, remember, a lot of these pedophiles are repeat offenders. If we do not deal with them, because the idea behind them being taken to prison is for the rehabilitation aspect to take place. Because if we let them loose today, tomorrow they'll violate another child or another person. So for the safety of society, we need to ensure these people are within the correctional facility.
All right, thank you. Anne, I don't know, if Betty, if you can still hear me, perhaps you can, I can throw this question to you and go back to where people are losing their jobs. And of course, you know, we've seen a lot of people being laid off during this time. There's an interview I did of other persons who said, you know, as soon as March 13th was announced, people were laid off. And of course, this is something that is raising stress levels in families for both the man and the woman, whoever is the breadwinner, or if they are both breadwinners. I mean, what should be done really? As a social advocate, what would you advise people to do in this time? All right, Betty, I think there was a technical issue. I'm going to ask the question again. Right now, people are being laid off. And of course, we've talked to people who said since March, or even just some days before March, they were laid off with the preemptions of COVID-19 pandemic and what it would do to the economy. Of course, we've seen a really negative growth to the economy due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And just to ask, of course, the stress levels are rising at the moment. And of course, this has contributed much to the gender-based violence in the families. But what can really be done during this time? All right, I understand we have a technical issue with our technical part, but we'll be taking a very short break. We'll be right back with both Betty and Anireri. Don't go too far. This conversation continues shortly. Welcome back to News Compass. We were discussing on the gender-based violence rising cases during this COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, the NGEC has reported recent cases. Police have reported recent cases. Different organizations have reported the rise of these cases during this COVID-19 pandemic, especially with the curfew and the cessation of transport and movement. Of course, more cases have been witnessed with sexual assault as well in families and marital rape. And tonight we were joined by Betty Adera, who is a social advocate, and FIDA Executive Director Andrew Ireri, who have been just telling us more about what their role is and, of course, what should be done and what can be done during this time to avoid or to reduce the numbers that are currently. And Betty, karibu sana again. I had asked you a question on people who are who have lost their jobs currently. We've had so many people who have been laid off, and the stress levels are high, of course. This has contributed highly to these cases. But how can people, of course, we've seen that COVID-19, as you have said, has exposed a lot with how people are living with each other. But how can we deal with this really, especially now that you say people are broke?
Well, I'm thinking that this is one case where I would appeal to our government, I would appeal to our president to come in and just cushion people. The other day, we just saw so many employees being laid off at the airport by the Kenya Aviation Authority. And you've gone to work, you're being told in the night that they're withdrawing all your passes and all that. And at the time that they're telling you they've laid you off, it is a night time, you are not prepared, and there's nowhere you can go because of the curfew. So it's like just adding salt onto injury. I know so many organizations that have sent their employees on compulsory unpaid leave. So you still have a job, quote unquote, but you're not earning salary until that time when the government will determine that it is now fit for Kenya to be opened up. And I haven't even mentioned, all these people who work in the factories, and tomorrow is even Labor Day. I've not even touched, like the laborers. So I'm thinking that one, people just need to have money in their pockets. So if landlords, can be more humane at this time and just have a conversation with their tenants on a plan on how the rent will be paid when it will be okay to pay it. But in the meantime, just don't throw people, out, because rent is one big issue that causes a lot of stress. Food you can hustle here, with on a budget of 10 shillings a day, you can still eat, but rent is rent. Secondly, if the way the government has deemed fit that
Yeah.
some restaurants can start working and operating with restrictions, can factories also be allowed to do the same? All these spaces that were employing masses and masses of people, can they begin to open up, of course, obeying the COVID-19 restrictions? And then back to the social protection space of the cash transfer. Of course, we know that the government already had a list of vulnerable people within their cash transfer system
Mm-hmm.
even before COVID. But can that list be expanded to be sure that at least widows, orphans, young mothers, child mothers, persons living with disabilities, the elderly, this person who, if she does not get any slight help, she's gonna boil stones, as we were hearing, the other day. And this
Yeah.
is also a call that I'd make to the county
Mm-hmm.
governments, in Kenya, because county governments know you better than the national government. Can
Oh,
the county governments also put in a system where they can know who is this worst case scenario, of a person, and just figure out how to help them with stuff, with money, and also just with, like food stamps.
all
But
right.
that is there's just no way out. There's no way out. People just need money, flowing in their pockets,
Yeah,
however
people.
little.
People actually do need money. What you say is right, of course, and we've seen a lot being committed to, the vulnerable, and of course all the people who have been laid off. We've seen the government say, there are those cash transfers. We've even seen other Kenyans just giving other Kenyans, of course, which is something that is we expect our government to actually do. But of course, because of course saying we go back to work, I'm not sure how much the social distancing would work much. But for now, of course, Kenyans need to be cushioned, to just lower the stress levels, as you have said. Let me ask Anne a question on perhaps emotional abuse. And we've had, of course, men who are abusive to women emotionally and vice versa, women who, of course, abuse men emotionally, And of course, that's where someone just gets angry and, they just remove their rage, even as we conclude this conversation. And what should we do on this matter?
Thank you. As you've rightfully said, there's a lot of emotional abuse taking place,
Yeah.
both towards women and towards men. What we urge parties who are affected or victims is get out when you can. I think what we are seeing, and that's what we've been doing since we started the toll center as feeder,
Yeah.
is really we are trying to put the fires off when they're really highly lit. I wish these people would have gotten or sought help earlier on, because if it starts as emotional violence, it's likely going to end up in a very abusive physical violence. So we are urging Kenyans to find a way to get out, get to know who your partner is, and if you find yourself in a situation that is abusive, whether it's emotional, financial, physical, just try and get help and get out sooner rather than later, because then the later might be very sad, might be a fatality, and you don't want to say we ought to have done something better. So we are calling upon a lot of Kenyans to embrace that. And as you've said, there are options. People can cooperate. There are always, there are other people out there. I don't think we really need to force that people stay in abusive relationships.
Yeah.
And I think even in terms of our culture, we've seen a lot of acceptance that at times relationships don't work and people can move on to other options. I think what you're trying to salvage is the worst case scenarios as we are seeing now, where the abuse is really extensive and in a number of cases it's too late, too little too late. So we are urging Kenyans to speak up, get out, get help. There are a number of toll-free numbers for emotional issues right now. We know they're heightened because of the COVID stress. They can reach out to ourselves as FIDA. The Ministry of Health also has a toll-free number. So let them find, or just get someone who's close to you, who you can trust and speak to. Then you'll be able to address whatever issues you have.
All right. Now, as we conclude this conversation, perhaps we can say our parting shots. I know gender-based violence is something that has gone on for a long time, even before COVID-19 pandemic was here. And of course, I mean, for people to even just speak out and just, remove the feminism thing out of it and just say, this is something that we need to fight as FIDA, as an individual, or as Kenyans. Just give us your parting shots as we conclude this conversation, of course, on what we as women, our role as men, and of course, as the role of the government in all this, the role of, if I may say, FIDA or even social advocates like Betty. What are we supposed to, how does this all end up?
Very much. For us, I think we believe that the family is a bedrock of society. For Kenya to be great, we need healthy families and healthy societies. And that calls on us as individuals to take care of each other, to make sure we don't have any form of violence that's taking place, whether it's physical, emotional, or financial. And there are means to deal with violence when it occurs. Speak out and get out if you can. And we call upon all other institutions that are working on this issue at government level, at county level, at society level. Let's try and speak louder about this issue. Let's not be silent about it. We've seen it's come to the fore. Let not this be just another situation. Then 9 months later, we say, yes, there was that surge and we never did anything about it. Let's speak out now. Let's find long-term solutions. Let's strengthen the family unit and let's strengthen individuals, both men and women. Let us understand as a society that gender equality is not about competition. It is about bringing out the best of both men and women who are equally needed for a strong society and for development to take place.
All right, Betty, let's hear from you.
Thank you. Well, my parting shot would be that the response to COVID-19 cannot be complete if it doesn't embrace a response to gender-based violence within it. And the gender-based violence response must also be done in such a way that it goes beyond the COVID-19 period. It must be comprehensive and it also must be sustainable. There is need for both national and county governments to invest in social systems and rescue shelters, to protect those who need to be protected. We all need to continuously talk about empowering communities and families and girls and boys, men and women, everyone, to take action and speak up, just like Anne has said. We also need to think about strengthening our mental health interventions, because within the gender-based violence, mental health issues like come up. And let's also strengthen the online help platforms and let everyone know what they can do and where they can call or who they can call.
Yeah.
And as Anne had said also earlier, let's continue strengthening the reporting systems and just let people know that the way we were saying before COVID is the same way we will say today, is the same way we will say after COVID, that you really need to report so that you can be helped. Otherwise, I would wish my fellow Kenyans Labor Day tomorrow. I wish I could say Happy Labor Day, but there's no.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, but I'm thinking it's also a time now to speak about labor issues,
Yes.
and especially within the context of COVID-19 and gender-based violence.
All right. Thank you so much, Betty. Thank you so much, Anne, for contributing to
Thank
this
you.
Conversation. Of course, we do hope that gender-based violence will end, even if it's not tomorrow, but I hope that it will end as soon. And of course, the numbers will reduce by the day, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic. That is Betty Adera from Adera Foundation, who is also a social advocate, and Anne Ireri from FIDA, Executive Director from FIDA. Thank you so much for joining us. Of course, we'll be talking to you later on these matters in the future of gender-based violence. And this is where we wrap up this conversation here on NewsCompass. Thank you so much for joining us and choosing Ebru to keep you informed as always. I hope you are keeping safe and always maintaining good sanitation and hygiene, even as we curb the spread of coronavirus here in the country. My name is Diana Rachel Mbogwa. Our sign language interpreter earlier on was Joyce Wairimu. Thank you to everyone who made this broadcast a success. Have yourself a lovely night, and God bless you. Good night.